All right, everybody, welcome to BO Boys for Thursday, July 27th. Fuck it. It's a raw feed. We're doing it live. I'm Clayton.
Yeah, I'm Pat. Clayton. Barbenheimer is here. We covered it the other day on our weekend wrap-up episode, but to really get into it, we had to bring in the legend himself, the icon, the box office daddy. He is the one and only Scott Mendelson is here to cover the one of the biggest weeks in box office history. Scott, thanks for joining the BO Boys.
Thank you for having me. I'm recording from Akron, Ohio. I'm on a quasi-working vacation to visit family. The only reason it's not a vacation is I was in Hawaii a couple weeks ago. So this time I'm actually, working while I'm here.
Okay, he's
Um,
working. What are what are you doing in Ohio? What is the work that you could get done box office
well,
theatrical wise in Ohio?
don't tell anyone, but I'm going to various small town theaters in small town Ohio and seeing if the Sound of Freedom theaters are actually as full as Fandango proclaims them to be.
Wow. Now, I mean, the thing is, if that word gets out, someone's sitting in a Sound of Freedom theater and they spot Scott Mendelson come in, they know that there's box office investigative reporting going on, and they're going to call their buddies and they're gonna be like, "Get your butts in these seats because
Yeah.
Mendelson is here and he's checking up on the Sound of Freedom
if
theaters.
if
He's
this
making
needs to
sure
be
we
seen, I am making a joke. I'm not actually doing
he's
that.
of course
Between you
not.
and me, I mean, whether or not the conspiracy theories about people buying tickets and not using them is actually true, I don't care because honestly, it's a victimless crime.
Right.
The theaters are getting the money, and that's all that matters.
Right. And of course,
The only
Sound
people
of
that are being
Freedom.
conned are box office pundits like me.
Right. Yeah. And Sound of Freedom, the main thing you think of with Sound of Freedom is victimless crime. So that is what the producers of that movie are always stressing. So,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to obviously, this is going to be heavily Barbenheimer today and then 10 seconds on Haunted Mansion preview. But let's start real quick. So, Scott, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. I mean, it is now officially every day losing the daily box office tallies to Sound of Freedom. It's fallen behind Sound of Freedom this past weekend and its second weekend. Monday, Tuesday, it ranks behind Sound of Freedom. Is Mission Impossible A going to make less than Sound of Freedom? Is it going to make less than Dial of Destiny? Give us your Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 State of the Union. What is
Well,
what
I
is
think,
going on?
not to toot my own horn, but I think the general paying consumers liked it about as much as I did, comparatively speaking. That's not to say that they didn't think it was fine, whatever. But I think we all went into the summer thinking, including myself, thinking that
Mhm.
it was going to be an event. And
Yep.
I think for most moviegoers, it was closer in line to something like The Flash or Dial of Destiny, or Rise of the Beast, where it's just another, this franchise. We get them every once in a while, and this week it's one of these.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
It was, there obviously was no Top Gun bump of any way, shape, or form. And yeah, domestically, unless Sound of Freedom drops dead after in this weekend, it's pulling ahead little by little every day, and I don't think Mission Impossible is going to catch up.
Right, because Sound of
Yeah,
Freedom is ahead of Mission Impossible in the total now. So
ahead since I
if
think Sunday.
yeah, so if Mission Impossible doesn't make up ground, it's already lost, which is just a crazy thought. I mean, there was no
Unlikely.
Maverick bump. Was there almost a Maverick deficit where people felt like we saw so much of Tom Cruise last year, we need some time off? Because it does feel like I
I
can't
don't
imagine
think
Maverick hurt this
so.
movie, but
No, because I mean, here's the thing. I mean, it opened on a Wednesday, which I think was a mistake because the film
mhm,
did what, $80 million over 5 days.
yep,
It would have been a lot easier to sell, say, 70, 75 million over 3 days as a win.
Mm-hmm.
mhm,
A solid uptick from Mission Impossible Fallout versus having to explain why in 5 days it did less than Dial of Destiny in its first 5 days. So I think
mhm,
that was a mistake.
right.
Um, I think they all knew the freight train that was Barbenheimer coming down the tracks, but not in time to say, to hell with this, we're opening on July 7th, which,
Right.
in a perfect world would have been the option.
Right.
I think a
Right.
lot of pundits and I think a lot of studio people overestimated Dial of Destiny and The Flash. Because if you go into it thinking those films might underperform, then July 7th is a golden release date.
Right. So you feel like they held it
gas and The Flash is going to be the next Aquaman, then you keep your distance.
Right.
And
yeah, there's a lot of Monday morning. Yeah, there's a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking about that release date, but 2 months ago, it looked like the perfect release date. And I don't, when Barbie was tracking to open at 60. Right.
And I can joke that, I didn't know it was going to be the worst film since Part 3, but I'm in a minority opinion on that. I'm aware of that. The other thing is, I don't think that had much to do with it. It got an A from Cinema Score. The people that showed up liked it. It clearly did not become the gotta see it, fear of missing out event film of the summer, or at least one of the event films of the summer. Even something along the lines of, say, Across the Spider-Verse or Guardians 3. And it lost the PLF screens. It lost the IMAX screens, which Tom Cruise saw coming. And now it's in a position of being an also ran. It also exists.
Right.
If you're going to the movies in the next month, especially if you're like an adult that only goes once or twice a month, if that, with or without a babysitter, you're probably seeing Barbie or Oppenheimer.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, because the thought was, the Maverick bump, like you said, did not materialize. And I had been saying it for a long time. But the thing with what they were hoping with this 7 was that the people who don't go to the theater a lot would go and see this movie. Like, people who hadn't seen a movie since Maverick would see this movie.
Yeah.
But what they did, like you said, was they went to see Barbie or Oppenheimer. Those are people who don't go to see movies regularly, and they went to see that, not a number 7 in a franchise that's always done okay domestically.
Yes, and I think globally it will do okay. The problem is it costs $290 to make, which again, that's an issue with a number of franchises we're seeing this summer, because of COVID upcharges, because of star salaries, because of inflation, because of various other variables, are a lot more expensive than previous installments in their respective franchises. And as a result, for example, Fast X only doing about as well as F9 looks a lot worse on paper, because one cost around $240 or whatever, the other cost $340. And Mission Impossible Fallout cost $180, but this one cost $290. So there you go. Now, hopefully that's a temporary situation, because a lot of these films were greenlit before COVID, and they were expecting a pre-COVID marketplace, both worldwide and especially in China, which delivers almost no money nowadays, more or less. And I think, in many ways, Barbie and Oppenheimer are a way forward. Those films combined cost less money than Dial of Destiny.
Wow. Yeah, on this franchise note, this summer does seem to be the story of franchises being put to rest in some way, or hitting a real valley. So which franchises of those we mentioned would you say are pretty much dead at the box office? Like, obviously Mission Impossible, they're going to make another one, but coming off of this, we may be truly looking at the next Mission Impossible being something of a series finale. It may just have to be, so Fast and Furious, where do you think that is? Is that a one movie?
And to be fair, Mission Impossible and Fast X were both intended to be part 1 of 2, with being a series finale. I used to joke, Dominic Toretto and the Deathly Mufflers part 1 or whatever. But so that's why I'm not that concerned for these franchises, because Mission Impossible was always supposed to end after the next one. Fast X was supposed to end after the next one. I don't think there's going to be a 6th Indiana Jones film.
I think
there's
not.
going to be one regardless. So
Is Transformers a dead franchise? Do you think that's
a good question, because weirdly enough, of the mid-June franchise pictures, that one did the best, which is funny if you think about it.
It held pretty well after the low opening, but it still doesn't feel like a franchise that has much momentum.
It's going to do about Bumblebee numbers, but on a bigger budget.
Right.
And you're right. It doesn't have franchise momentum in any way, shape, or form.
Right. They were teasing at the end of that it's going to be Transformers and G.I. Joe, and obviously I don't think that.
Son said after that scene.
What did he say?
What is G.I. Joe?
Yep.
Wow. Exactly. Wow. Yeah.
This is waving the red flag.
So, and now the Flash. We've got Blue Beetle coming up in August. I know you're a big still proponent of Aquaman's going to do fine, but as we get
James Wan.
That is the thing. That is the movie that does have a, bona fide star director behind it. He did the first one, but DC really does feel like a dead IP outside of course, you put out a Batman movie, you put out Joker's the biggest movie star in the world still, but DC does feel like it just has such a stink on it that overall to me, that feels like a dead franchise. If you consider Batman a non-DC property.
And as I've said many times, and you're probably all sick of hearing this, they were doing fine before COVID.
Mm-hmm.
They just got kneecapped by a number of factors. COVID, Wonder Woman 84 would have been a hit. The Snyder cut, because HBO Max needed content, it brought the whole Snyder thing discourse back to the front of the table. Warner Brothers went through like 8,000 regime changes in a 2-3 year period. And all of that just sucked that marrow dry. And between you and me, I think James Wan's Superman Legacy will be very good because he generally makes very good movies. But I don't think that's going to save the day.
I
think with something like that, you get one chance to say we can do it. Mm-hmm. And for the last 10 years, they've been, up and down, up and down, up and down with some genuine highs. Again, say what you will about what DC did or didn't do. They got critically acclaimed blockbusters out of Wonder Woman and Aquaman.
And Joker.
An R-rated, action light, Oscar-nominated, Oscar-winning drama.
Yeah.
That cost about as much as the first Deadpool film.
Right.
That made $1 billion.
And now Blue Beetle's tracking to open in single digits.
Yeah. And that was, it breaks my heart from a representation standard that should have come out in 2017, 2018.
Well, it's a movie that costs $120 million, which is only $25 million less than Barbie. And I went to see Barbie today, and that trailer came on, and there was zero interest for it because it looks like the way they're selling it is if Spider-Man was a Kafkaesque monster, like if he had to become a beetle in the most terrifying way possible. It's the same thing. And it's like, who wants to see Spider-Man with Kafka? That I think to me...
I think the first trailer is good. I think the second trailer is very busy in a non-entertaining way.
Yeah.
And it's doing the whole, remember Iron Man? This is the same plot.
Mm-hmm. Right. So
and you're right about the Spider-Man thing. I never thought about that. It's like, what if Spider-Man really did grow, 8 legs and shoot webs out of his ass?
It's disgusting. It's
not
body horror.
Anyway. Yeah, it's body horror.
Yeah,
it's body horror. Yeah, it's Cronenberg takes over DC, which it's DC as in David Cronenberg. That's what DC has become with Blue Beetle. Yeah, at least it would be something. At least it would be something interesting. But let's talk. Let's talk about Barbie. So Scott, put into perspective for us, Clayton and I tried to talk about this opening weekend and how historic it was. And now we've gotten numbers on how it's played on Monday, how it's played on Tuesday. How incredible is this first 5 days of Barbie so far?
Potentially game changing.
Wow.
Whenever I blow a call, and I do, when I look over it, I realize all the rules that I keep in my head that I forgot to apply to the film in question. And
Mhm.
with everyone's been spending all summer saying, what's the next Top Gun Maverick? Is this going to be the next Top Gun Maverick? And what I always say is that the next Harry Potter was the Twilight series, which had nothing to do with Harry Potter. Couldn't be more
Mhm.
different. And the
Mhm.
next Twilight saga was the Hunger Games, which was itself very different from the Twilight films. What was the
Mhm.
next Game of Thrones? It was The Boys, which was very different from Game of Thrones. So I
Mhm.
ask you, this summer, what becomes the next Top Gun Maverick? The film least like Top Gun Maverick you could possibly imagine. A candy-coated, action light, kid-friendly, female skewing Barbie movie.
Yep. Yep. You never know. And like you were here, I think it was in June was the last time you were here. And at that point, the Barbie tracking had not gotten anywhere near to exploding. It was still this could open at 40 or this could open at 60. It was in that range.
Yeah.
And
We all thought it would be a solid hit just because
yes.
it looked good. Warner
Well,
Brothers was spending the money. I think the one unpredictable thing that happened, one of the many unpredictable things that happened, is that not only did the online discourse bleed out into the real world, but the discourse was almost overwhelmingly positive.
yes.
Instead of having these obnoxious think pieces about, Oppenheimer is the triumph of Dune cinema, while Barbie is the triumph of, what real, counterculture and counter programming in the movie we need right now. Everyone was rooting for both films.
Yes.
I haven't seen
Yes.
blockbuster discourse this entirely non-toxic since Godzilla v Kong.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing that happened at the end of Godzilla v Kong is they both ended up on the same side. Spoiler alert.
Exactly.
And that's what Barbenheimer was. It was Godzilla v Kong, where at first you think they're going to fight, but then at the end they team up, and everyone just loves seeing them team up. And listen, I and Clayton said this in 2021 that Godzilla v Kong should have opened that year's Oscars. They should have hosted the Oscars.
I
And
agree.
coming off of Barbenheimer weekend, you got to get in character Margot Robbie and Cillian Murphy to co-host the Oscars as Barbie
I actually think it
and
would be
Oppenheimer.
funnier because Cillian Murphy is such a distinct personality. I actually think it would be funnier having him as himself doing that kind of gig.
I mean, listen, if he seems very similar to Oppenheimer, so introduce him as Cillian Murphy, but he's going to wear the same clothes and he's going to scare the shit out of you. So either way, but that it's true. That's what people loved about this weekend was there was just a sweetness and a camaraderie, whether you were seeing the movie about the toy or you were seeing the movie about nuclear holocaust. Either way, you were happy about it. So this, sticking to this Barbie weekend, I mean, talk about you said it was a game changer. In what way do you think this could potentially be a game changer for the industry?
Well, I think both films doing as well as they did. Both films doing, frankly, best case scenario business. Both films helping each other. Like, again, I think they both would have been hits. But let's be honest, if they had opened like apart from each other, we'd probably be talking about why a 40 million opening for Oppenheimer is just fine, damn it. Because remember, Interstellar and Dunkirk only opened to 50. And we'd be talking about how, great, Barbie opened to $60 million. That's terrific. Didn't quite sell as many tickets as Scooby-Doo, but hey, whatever.
So you think the combination was that important that it basically added 100 million potentially to Barbie? And I think we all agree that.
I think by the end it was a little less than that in the sense that Barbie was obviously a much bigger deal than even the optimists had presumed.
Right.
In the same way that, when Top Gun opened, like, it's doing great. It might do 125 million.
Right.
And then it does 125 in 3 days.
Right.
But yes, I think by the end, they had lifted each other up to such an extent because both films were part of the top of the pop culture discourse.
Yes.
All the pop culture conversations were about those two films. And unlike most films that come out these days, and this has been the case for several years, there really was a fear of missing out, to use internet lingo, surrounding these two pictures. So as long as you were old enough to sit through a 3-hour R-rated movie about the atomic bomb, you wanted to see both of them if you could.
And the Atomic Blonde in Barbie.
Yes,
I mean,
which excellent movie, by the way. Well, both of them,
yep.
yes.
So
and yeah, it helped that they were both good movies. They were both distinct, specific filmmaker-driven visions encased within the protective tissue of tropes and or IP and or marquee filmmakers, an ensemble cast, all of these things that give you protection that will allow you to do something interesting with your movie if you take that.
Right.
And I think 50 years since The Dark Knight, and people, what people forget about The Dark Knight is how unusual that film still is in terms of, a comic book superhero film. It's a Sidney Lumet city politics drama. And yes, there's action and adventure, but the movie ends with 3 angry, devastated, sad men yelling at each other in a bombed out building with 2 guilt-ridden heroes begging the villain for mercy. That's not something you've ever saw in a comic book movie beforehand or afterwards.
Right.
And the point of that is that if you're trying to emulate these very unique, specific pictures, you have to remember that they were successful because they were specific and unique and didn't necessarily adhere to every box on the formula checklist.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think it was the juxtaposition of the 2 movies, like you said, one being so heavy in its themes and, and so dour in the filmmaking, and then the other one being so light and fun. And the fact that it be a 6-hour ordeal to sit through both of them. And I say ordeal in a positive way, in the sense that it's a challenge. Everybody likes challenges. They want to go on TikTok and say, I did the Barbenheimer challenge and I survived. My butt hurts, but I'm happy. I switched costumes in between. I went and saw this one first. You saw this one first. It became a thing that, like you said, and it's weird that the whole Barbie, not that this is going to spoil anything, but they cross over from Barbie land into the real world. And this was the meme moment of crossing over into the real world. These memes biked their way, took the spaceship, took the boat, came over into the real world, and actually did some good for once, instead of goofing on stuff like Morbius and, all the way back in Snakes on a Plane. The difference is there was positivity around this and a sense of community around this that those things were missing.
Yeah.
And they were. No, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, well, it just wasn't a matter of people on the internet being like, hey, I wonder if we could get this silly shit to happen, which is the case with, maybe we could get them to put Morbius back in theaters for a laugh, or, oh, we could get Samuel Jackson to say this line that the internet wrote in a movie, but no one wanted to see either of those movies. They just wanted to.
I still think the mistake was not screening it for critics, because it's a pretty good movie. I think it would have gotten a lot of 3-star reviews, and people that otherwise were like, I'm not spending movie theater money for a movie that's being sold as willfully bad, might have shown up. But I digress.
Right. So talk about these legs that we're seeing on Barbie, and not those legs, huh? The box office legs we're seeing on Barbie.
We're not sexist, huh?
Legs,
not those.
Knows how to use them.
But Scott is, of course, singing about box office legs when he's singing that song.
Yes.
So this Monday number, what did it make? 26 million on Monday, another 26 on Tuesday.
Another 20, it's Warner Brothers' biggest Monday and Tuesday ever, not accounting for inflation.
Wow.
The Monday number was like and I'm going off memory, so forgive me, the 8th biggest Monday ever. And if you take away holiday Mondays like Memorial Day, July 4th or July 5th or whatever, and you take away like Mondays that were in the middle of December when everybody was off school, like Star Wars, Spider-Man, No Way Home, Avatar, this, Titanic, that, yada, yada, yada. It's the 2nd biggest Monday ever under those variables behind Avengers Endgame.
Wow.
Which is coming off a $356 million opening weekend, not a $162 million opening weekend.
Wow. So to me, that obviously shows that the legs on this for the second weekend are going to be great. I mean, you look at the just go onto an AMC app or Fandango or anywhere and look at what the seating charts are. I mean, here in New York, you can't find a Barbie ticket this weekend. It's sold out everywhere. So
People are going
You
to be buying tickets to Sound of Freedom and sneaking into Barbie.
wow. I mean, or I guess they're gonna buy. Yeah, that. I mean, you don't want those crowds. I don't think to overlap too much, but
Well, you can
um,
go on the Angel Studios website. You can use one of their pay forward codes and
right,
sneak in and watch Barbie because
right,
Yes.
you're still doing your good,
right, and you
whatever
just
good
then
it does.
and then you just sit on the stairs in a Barbie screening room. Just
Mhm.
get yourself in that building, and you'll find Barbie somehow. But you have something called the $100 million Losers Club, which is
Oh
when a
God.
movie makes so much money that in its second weekend it manages to drop 100 million. But obviously, because it's a giant hit, and that drop had
Yeah.
to happen. Look, not to get into our numbers predictions, but you look at what Barbie's doing in these single days at the beginning of the week. I mean, I think Barbie could make 100 million again in its second weekend. I mean, this
I
is
agree.
potential. Wow.
And well, yeah, and even so, yeah, I was thinking about that, but I didn't know if I wanted to go into that spiel. So thank you for doing it for me. Yeah, I mean, it dropped 50% drop is still $81 million.
Wow. Wow.
And
Yeah.
that's a situation where it's like 81 would have been a terrific opening weekend for Barbie.
Mhm.
Yes, exactly.
And,
Exactly. It's a
and
case
yeah,
where
I
the
mean, at
second
this
weekend.
point, it's a
Mhm.
question of does it become the biggest domestic grosser of the summer? Probably. Maybe by
Yeah.
as soon as like a week from Friday, or a
Right.
week, let's say a
Right.
week from Sunday.
Right.
Or and how close does it get to, or does it surpass Super Mario Brothers
Yeah, because
domestically? It's still far away from $1.4 billion for now.
yeah.
Mhm.
Well, let's throw it out there. Do you think this ends up getting past Super Mario Brothers? Because I would say at this point, I definitely see that path. Because it
There's
does
so much
have the
more
summer.
competition for the next month.
But what if that competition will really matter? I mean, obviously, Haunted Mansion this weekend won't matter at all. You've got the Meg coming
Yeah.
up, and you got Turtles coming up. Turtles could put a
I mean,
little bit of a hurt on it, but
yes, Turtles will open well because it's supposed to be very good and it's a very
Mhm.
well respected property. One that, like we've all said this before. One of the reasons Turtles does so well is because it gets recycled a lot. And every time there's a new version, it is aimed at the new generation of fans with
Mhm.
nostalgia a distant second concern. So every
Mm.
version of Turtles is, your version. However, if you're 12 years old or 8 years old or whatever.
Right, right,
Um,
right. They don't
And
age
unlike,
the
say,
Turtles
G.I.
up.
Joe that hasn't had, Rise of Cobra was, 14 years ago.
Mhm.
But anyway, um, the Meg, I'm still bullish on the Meg, fingers crossed, but
Mhm.
Mhm.
I'm a little less bullish than I was a week ago.
Are you really? You think
Uh,
the Barbenheimer train could end up in the sea and hurt this Meg?
it's not going to help,
Wow.
because to whatever extent, if Barbie is performing as well as it is,
Mhm.
the Meg was never going to have IMAX screens because that's still Oppenheimer, but it might have
Mhm.
gotten some DLP or PLFs and Dolby's or whatever. But I
Yeah.
have to imagine if Barbie's still making a gajillion dollars, they're just going to give those to Barbie.
Wow.
Um, but
Wow.
now, to be
So
fair,
Yeah.
if the Meg costs as much as the first one did, that's 150 million. The last one did 530 million, and it's
mhm.
still pegged to do around 140 in China. So there's room. There's room to play.
Yo, yeah.
Um,
I do think Barbie is going to get past Mario. I mean, what is your thought? And also, if it gets past
domestically or
Mario,
worldwide?
I think worldwide, I think it could get to 1.4. I mean, it just seems like it is playing well internationally. It's not playing as a domestic only play here, and it is potentially just going to be number one in the US for like another 2 or 3 weeks. That very well could happen. This feels like Top Gun Maverick.
Does this not
It feels like
speak
the
to?
Dark Knight,
Yeah.
Yeah.
ironically.
Now, Scott, does this not speak to the desperate need that we always talk about? We beat this drum. I mean, you've said stuff before. I mean, we've said this a million times. PLFs and the need for more? Why are we talking about Barbie losing Dolbys and having no IMAXs? Why are we talking about the Meg not getting PLFs? Why do we have to talk about this? Why is there money being left on the table here theatrically when you could just rip out some of these bad theaters and put in big screens and hike the ticket prices up because people are willing to pay for it? The idea that people think movies are too expensive is BS. They think the movie theaters they go to are too expensive because of what they get as a consumer. People love IMAX. They love Dolby. They love the nice chairs. They love good light and sound. It's not being given to them. That's why people say it's too expensive. So we need these PLFs. Why are we having this juggling act right now? I mean, MI7 is dying because people were told to see it on the biggest screen possible. Now that's impossible. Talk about a Mission Impossible. Seeing Mission Impossible 7 on a big screen is impossible. The right screen, the biggest
screen. You are correct. That being said, I think the success of Barbie somewhat counters that notion because, I mean, it pulled off the biggest opening weekend ever by a lot for a film that A, didn't have IMAX screens, and B, wasn't offered in 3D.
Yeah.
As far as I know, it was not offered in 3D. I haven't seen any. So to a certain extent, yeah, IMAX was huge for Oppenheimer. It was a huge money driver. It was like 20% of the global numbers, I think, maybe 25%. But you still had a movie that was only playing in some PLF screens sometimes a day that just did $162 million. So I think the key for that is you need to make more event films of all shapes and sizes aimed at all differing demographics that don't necessarily scream, if you don't see this in IMAX, you might as well just wait for VOD.
Right,
yeah,
right.
That's true. That is true. If you have a limited supply of something, you can't say you must see this on this thing because it will backfire. Although Oppenheimer, it's sold out at the Lincoln Square AMC till mid-August. Like I had to get a front row seat, and I haven't seen it yet, but a front row seat to the IMAX 70 millimeter, just because I was like, this is such a rare thing. I need to do it. But you're right.
You haven't seen Oppenheimer yet?
I haven't. Everything was sold. I waited too long. I sat on it. I waited too long, and everything was sold out.
The nice thing about a movie about that is there's no spoilers. Because if you know your history, you know what happens.
Yeah.
And that's actually one of the things I like about the movie is that it really expects you to know your history. It gives zero time-specific exposition for you. But anyway.
So we have to know who Weinstein is, who this guy is.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. All right. I got to do some reading.
That's Walter Matthau in that one movie with Meg Ryan that I don't.
Yeah.
IQ.
Yes.
I mean, if that movie isn't playing on cable somewhere right now, it's doing it wrong because you really should try and sell IQ as the must-see before you go see Oppenheimer.
I agree with you in the sense that I think the best thing that theaters can do is to spend the money to make sure that, generally speaking, every theater, whether it's in downtown LA or quote unquote flyover country Kentucky or whatever, looks at least as good, if not better, than if you were to watch that film on a Blu-ray on your home setup. Now, does that necessarily mean them all have to be IMAX or PLF? Not necessarily. You just need to make sure that the average screen still looks as good as what I am accustomed to as a spoiled bastard living in, Simi Valley, Thousand Oaks, Hollywood, Santa Monica, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
But that being said, does a film like Oppenheimer play better in IMAX? Yeah. But if it's a good movie, it plays on any screen. I've seen Avatar on an airplane. It still kicks ass. I've seen Gravity in IMAX. I've seen Gravity in regular 3D. I've seen Gravity on a television screen. It rocks every time. If the fundamentals are there, the movie works.
But you didn't have to shell out $20+ to watch it on your TV. And that's what a movie theater is trying to get you to do.
You're absolutely right.
So looking at the success of Barbie, obviously the big talking point, the number one talking point coming out of it seems to be Greta Gerwig and that she has become in that tippy top echelon of star directors. She is now, I would say, a movie star director the way Tarantino is, the way Cameron is, the way Jordan Peele is, and obviously the way Nolan is, and to some extent Scorsese is with the right movie. But
With DiCaprio.
with DiCaprio, basically, yes.
With
If
Leo.
he's with DiCaprio, he's a movie star director. If he's with just Harvey Keitel, not as much.
Yeah.
But
Oh.
where do you now? The rumors are, and I don't know if this is official, you can let us know, that her next move is going to be to direct Witch in the Wardrobe Narnia movies for Netflix. And Clayton and I, in the last episode, we pled for that to not happen because we need Greta Gerwig in theaters at the box office. You were waving your finger. Scott, set us straight. What have you heard? What is she doing next?
Well, no, I've heard that too. And I'll be
Okay.
honest, that's the kind of news that when I read that, my thought was, wow, Barbie must be terrible.
Mm,
Wow. Right, because that news broke a week or so before Barbie came out.
Yeah.
yeah.
And I mean, if you want to make your pitch out there, you're obviously, and even as big as the BO Boys are, you're a bigger name than the
On
BO
one
Boys.
hand,
How do we get her to not direct a streaming movie, instead make a movie for theaters that could open again to $100 million in a couple of years?
well, I would say she can do whatever the hell she wants. Just make sure she gets paid up front by Netflix, but just do it quickly and come back to theaters soon.
Mm-hmm.
We need you back. I mean, the rumor is that it's a 2-movie deal at Netflix, which is it's such a nightmare scenario for the box office to lose her to streaming coming off of this. I mean, is there what are the chances for a Barbie 2? I mean, to me, it doesn't even seem like that's being talked about, which would be the opposite
you've
of
seen Barbie, right?
Yes.
Okay. And I assume everyone listening to this has seen the film. One of the things I think this is another good lesson is that the film is not made in any way, shape, or form to set up a sequel.
It's not.
I mean, if anything, by the time the film ends, you're like, well, that is a complete story.
Mm-hmm.
And if they do a sequel, they're going to have to backtrack in a way that might not be all that satisfying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Or they'll do a spin-off Michael Cera movie. Like it doesn't feel like this sets up anything that would be a slam doink surefire hit, because she might not be involved, and once you get into that territory, then it starts to be Return of Jafar, straight to DVD level.
I mean, yes, I'm sure Warner Brothers Discovery will allow for a Barbie sequel if one can be made.
Right.
I do wonder what story choices you do with something like that. You have to have Margot Robbie back. You almost have to have Greta Gerwig back, although I might have said the same thing when Tim Miller left Deadpool, and Deadpool 2 turned out fine. So I think Greta Gerwig is an added value element. I don't know if she's a marquee director yet.
Okay.
And if she spends all her time on Netflix, we never find out.
That's the
problem.
Don't know.
Barbie is such a giant IP. It was like we didn't know that Nolan was a marquee director even after The Dark Knight. It was Inception. It was like, oh shit, this guy can pack him in.
Right. Though I think with her, you have to look at the evidence of Little Women made over 100 million domestic.
Yes. They did 2 worldwide. Lady Bird did very well for an indie picture.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, I'm perfectly willing to give that notion the benefit of the doubt. I just hope we'll get one other test run soon enough.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think one of the things I was talking about in the summer of 2019 before COVID was the idea of directors becoming the new movie stars, where you had this emerging class of marquee directors like John M. Chu and James Wan, Jordan Peele, Rian Johnson, and the obvious ones like Wes Anderson, Tarantino.
Right.
But Peele was probably already a marquee director, let's be honest. Us had already come out at this point.
Right.
And Nolan. And unfortunately, I think that got sidelined by COVID, obviously. In the Heights kind of flopped. Malignant never really had a shot in hell. Mm-hmm. And now even Aquaman is riding rough waters. But I do think that is something that if we start seeing a situation where the director is a draw especially within a property, then hopefully you're going to see a lot more quote unquote filmmaker driven franchise pictures, IP exploitations of this nature, where who is making it will be almost as important as what the IP is.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, the Marvel movies have just been so factory produced since, some of those real interesting ones, like, the James Gunn Guardians movie. That's why the Guardians third movie did so well, is because it has an imprint of a individual as opposed to a cog in a machine, right? And you have these
Some of them, yeah.
Yeah, but you have these marquee guys coming up, though, like the Daniels. I mean, they could do something interesting. We don't know what the Safdies are doing next. Ari Aster, I know Beau is Afraid was his big blank check, but who knows? The guy might want to do some sort of property, and they're all kind of blossoming in a way where I could see them be the new Hollywood. Along with Greta and, and Jordan, and all that. They're like a younger group.
And they're all making Mattel movies.
They're
yeah. Slinky, get a Slinky movie.
That's where, Universal has sort of been pitching itself as a home for marquee filmmakers who want a safe place to make a non-franchise picture. They've got the Daniels. They had M. Night Shyamalan for a while, before they traded him at the bridge at midnight for James Wan. They got, they have Michael Bay. Even though Ambulance didn't do all that well, I guess it did well enough on PVOD. They're still in the Platinum Dunes business. And this, Oppenheimer was this huge show of force. There's a scientific term that it's on the tip of my tongue. Anyway, it's showing of that they can do this. Look at us at Universal. We sold a 3-hour R-rated action-free drama about white guys in suits talking in offices for 3 hours, and it's going to do 500 million worldwide.
Right. And do you think Warner Brothers, because Warner Brothers used to be that, they were the home of Kubrick and Clint Eastwood and Ben Affleck for a while, and Nolan, and it seems like since the streaming era, since COVID, they really fell off of that. They let Nolan go, but this movie was an old-fashioned, in a way, Warner Brothers hit. It was a star auteur.
2018 era, yeah,
right. It
was greenlit by Toby Emmerich, who was no longer there.
Well, so then do you think this changes anything at Warner Brothers? Does Zaslav start saying, you know what, I'm in the auteur business. I want to forget this DC stuff. I want to give big checks to great directors and let them make their passion projects, and we're going to make those into hits? Or is Barbie looked at as, wow, we made a movie because of internet memes, and that's what we need to do, is to make internet meme movies?
Both of those are equally possible.
Yeah.
And Warner Brothers, two things about Warner Brothers. They have a long history of turning less than conventional big movies into unmitigated blockbusters, going back at least to Magic Mike in 2012, an R-rated economic mobility drama about male strippers that opened to $39 million in the summer of 2012. And you've got Gravity, the Lego Movie, American Sniper, It, The Joker, Dune, Elvis, and now Barbie.
Yep.
This is what they do when they're at their best. And I would like to think that they are just going to, now that to a certain extent, I mean, yes, we're still in the COVID era. I don't want to pretend otherwise, but that disruption has ceased to a certain extent, that they're going to eventually get back to what they were doing in 2008, which is 2018, when they were just knocking out one and dones like crazy. Ready Player One, Crazy Rich Asians, A Star Is Born, Ocean's 8. They had such a great 2018 that Aquaman doing $1 billion was almost beside the point.
Wow. It's true.
And getting back to DC, and I felt this way since 2016, the ups and downs of DC has done more harm to Warner Brothers than good. Because the discourse around the DC universe has been so chaotic and so all-consuming. and often dictated by rumor mongering and fear mongering, and quite frankly, people with very specific agendas. That maybe liked the first couple DC films and wanted every other DC film to be kind of like those DC films. If you get what I'm saying here.
Yeah, we won't say his name. It's more dangerous than talking about Sound of Freedom.
And I don't blame him. I blame the acolytes. But anyway,
yes.
But if you look at the DC franchises in the last several years that aren't DC related, Monsterverse worked. The Conjuring universe is the first fully functioning, entirely successful cinematic universe after the Avengers that actually worked. Fantastic Beasts, the first two were relatively successful. The problem is the second one was terrible. And at the end of the day, I can't give them that much grief for listening to J.K. Rowling, the woman that up until a point was on pretty solid ground.
Right.
Yeah, but it's worth remembering that she only started going off the deep end in 2020.
Right.
So did Ezra Miller, for that matter. So in 2014, it was a great idea to cast this quirky, gender fluid, queer, indie, Jewish, goofy, oddball movie star as Barry Allen. That was progressive casting.
Right. Yeah. It just, some things don't work out 4 years later.
Yeah. Well,
for different reasons.
Yeah.
But so Warner Brothers definitely has a chance to take a right lesson from this Barbie movie and stick to something that worked, which is big one-off movies with visionary filmmakers. Now, I'm going to throw this out here. We talked about Greta Gerwig possibly being pulled into the streaming abyss. And I, not to be conspiracy theorist here, but I think there is something to a place like Netflix looking to spend money just to take away big stars from the box office. Because let's face it, Netflix wants movie theaters dead. But in a way that's not just, oh, we want to make their movies here. It is more about we want their movies to not exist in theaters because we want theaters to close down. So when Netflix takes a Bradley Cooper away, Star is Born happens, and what is Bradley Cooper's follow-up? A Netflix movie. So this guy who made a box office smash that was a drama that made what? Almost 200 million domestic. Oh,
425 worldwide.
425 worldwide. And Barbie's going to make $1 billion in its sleep. And then Netflix comes in and takes them away forever from theatrical. So, I mean, you're out there, you're reporting.
What I would do next is I would find a surprise theatrical crowd pleaser, like maybe an ensemble murder mystery of some kind that might be spawning a new theatrical franchise.
Wow.
And I would offer the filmmakers $500 million to make the next 2 films for Netflix.
Wow. What imagine a company so devilish as to do what you outlined. Surely no company would be that evil as to do that. But it's true.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at, that's right, Ryan Johnson and Knives Out as well. I do think streamers are doing things like that, taking away our Gerwigs, our Ryan Johnsons, our Bradley Cooperizes to try and kill off theatrical. That is again, I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist here.
Well, and that's my big fear about the strike is that the streamers and the studios are never going to come to agreement because they have differing goals.
Right. What is your what are you hearing right now? Because obviously you are not just a box office pundit.
But I'm not, I'm hearing the same stuff you're hearing. Nobody knows when it's going to end. There's no real sense of what a compromise looks like, when negotiations will begin again. It's not good.
Yeah.
And this is, and part of it is because I would argue that the people at the very top, the Zaslavs and
the
Igers to a certain extent, they're so above the fray that the little details in terms of let's make movies and TV shows are almost beside the point in their overall priorities, that I don't know if that's something that they compromise on.
Right, right. Like even when movie studios were owned by a gasoline company, it did kind of feel like the heads of the gasoline company were closer to the movie business than the owners of studios now. You know, at least like the people who owned a gasoline company seem like they went to the movies. I legitimately don't feel like the heads of these companies on the studio's behalf have been in a movie theater in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
They
And
feel so removed.
again, I have no real optimism, and I've got 100 doomsday scenarios in my head.
Oh boy.
Is this all, are they going to wait for the studios to just get demolished because they have nothing to release? And then Netflix is going to agree to the inflated terms, knowing that the other studios can't afford that.
Jeez.
I don't know.
Jeez.
Or is this just put theaters on the rocks again, knowing that if they go under, Netflix wins? I don't know.
Well, I do think that is a real thing that's happening here, is that your Netflixes, Amazons, Apples, who are for some reason at the heads of negotiating on behalf of the theatrical movie industry, that you've got hardware companies and a company that sells toilet paper are negotiating the future of the movie
Netflix only
business.
joined in 2021.
Right. So right now, and you could tell us if any of these triggers have been pulled, but the word is that you might start to see big end of year movies moving out of 2023 into 24 because you can't have actors promoting the movies.
So far, everyone I've spoken to, and this can change at any moment, or they might just be lying to me and whatever, that's their job. So far, they say full speed ahead. There may be some small films that get delayed, like Challengers, because you need Zendaya to market that. Right. I would not be shocked if some of the formerly Fox pictures, like Death and Haunting in Venice or The Creator, get moved.
Oh my God!
Poor Things got moved to December, but that makes sense. That's still getting a Venice premiere, and that's the slot that Jonathan Majors Magazine Dreams is supposed to open on. So if that ends up getting tossed, well, you've got a movie right there. So no harm, no foul.
Right.
But so far, we have not heard any concrete word about, Dune or Aquaman or the Marvels or, big movies like that.
Yeah. I mean, with the Marvels, it does feel like just get it off the slate and be done with it.
Yeah. I mean, they put out a new trailer. They put out a new trailer for Haunting in Venice. Lionsgate put out a new posters for The Expendables 4. We're getting a Saw 10 trailer on Saturday.
Wow.
And, Sony has a lot of star-driven pictures. I think it's going to be a challenge for them. Craven the Hunter, Equalizer 3, Anybody But You, a few others that I'm probably forgetting.
I've heard Equalizer 3. I've heard Equalizer 3. Denzel has already filmed promotion for it before. And basically, he said that's all he was going to do anyway. You weren't going to get Denzel on Hot Ones anyway, so then you're not really losing much by him being on track.
As far as Killers of the Flower Moon, DiCaprio doesn't do a ton of press anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, that to me feels like a big one. Do you feel like that is a sure thing 2023 release, or is there any? No. Why so?
I think it stays. I'm sorry. I think it stays.
Okay, got it.
The only. And again, this is not inside baseball, because if it was, I wouldn't be talking about it because I don't want to get anyone in trouble. Right. But they know DiCaprio's not going to do a lot of publicity. The film's already had a glossy, critically acclaimed premiere. There is interview footage that exists that they did in the festival debut. There's already 2 trailers.
Right.
Might as well go for it.
Right. And with that one, you could have Scorsese as a DGA member do all the promotion.
As long as Scorsese is willing to do promotion on behalf of the picture.
Right.
And, I imagine he would, just because at every stop he'll say, like what Chris Nolan is doing, where he was out front with Oppenheimer all week, but every stop he said, unity, I support the strikers.
Right. And who's gonna call Scorsese a scab? Let them call him a scab to his face. They wind up with a baseball bat on their head. So let's be honest.
I think the big one that people are fearing,
but he's such a nice old man,
is Dune 2, right? Dune 2 is the one people are worried is going to move.
Here's the thing with Dune 2. Maybe because that's got a big ensemble cast that Warner Brothers is banking on. But A, that film is as much legendary as Warner Brothers, so they have to come to an agreement.
Yeah.
And B, they now have 6 weeks of exclusivity in IMAX.
Yeah.
If they move, they'd be lucky to get more than 2.
It's so true. And that's a movie that I do think the filmmakers felt a little screwed with when it was released. And then it got the
Yeah.
day and date because it did so well, even in high COVID times, that they were thinking, okay, if this movie gets released unimpeded by anything, it is going to be a blockbuster. It's going to be huge. And if there's a SAG strike and the actors can't go on talk shows because there are no talk shows and they're not allowed to say anything, they could feel screwed once again. And I think that's where Dune 2 is such an outlier for all these other movies, is that the first part,
Yeah.
the filmmakers felt like they got screwed and they don't want to get screwed twice.
Yeah. And again, it's my gut says so far no, but as we saw with COVID, it's all speculation until somebody pulls the trigger.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the one reason you could see some movies move. Oh, go for it, Scott.
I apologize. One thing we should note is that Warner Brothers' big 4 year-end titles have a lot of overlap between them. You have 2 live action. You have Wonka, Aquaman 2, Dune 2, and The Color Purple. In those 4 films, you have 2 Shyamalan films. You've got 2 live action musicals, and you have 2 big budget action adventure, fantastical, far off world adventure films. So one of those might get moved just to spread out a little bit.
Right. And the fact that because of the simultaneous strikes, production is totally shut down. And unfortunately, we're almost looking at a 2020, 2021 situation next year where who knows what's going to be ready to go out. So, I mean, I can't believe where Barbenheimer weekend should be a nonstop. This should be the box office Mardi Gras. We're just partying our brains out all week. We're in the streets falling down drunk and happy. But here we are talking about 2024 might not have that many movies that are able to come out. So you might see a Color Purple or a Wonka move to next year just to fill a May slot.
Yeah, and if one of those is the ones that moves, one of the Warner Brothers pictures, even that I don't think is time to panic yet. Because, again, there's a good Warner Brothers, if they can, would like to have a big movie in 2024 in case something doesn't get finished.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I would almost move Color Purple only because it's an awards sort of film, and I think you ride this Barbie train because get Gosling up there for Best Supporting Actor for this movie, and get as many people as you can. Get America up there for Best Supporting Actress.
Yep.
Push this one this year because it's going to be so different than Killers of the Flower Moon, which is going to be a behemoth, which will probably get nominated for everything and win nothing. But still, it's going to be a big, huge behemoth. And I think that's the one you move. Get Color Purple, the Prestige one, move that. You cannot move Aquaman again. I know they're doing reshoots and adding different Batmans.
Just get it out there.
Or whatever. You have to get this movie out. You have to.
I am tired of waiting.
It's Scott, almost New Mutant situation at this point.
Yeah.
How many Batmans have you heard are in Aquaman? Because I've heard that we're now up to 11 Batman.
I've heard there's
zero Batman.
0 Batmans.
I mean,
and again, I'm reading the same news you are in that sense.
So we'll see. I just want to find out how many Batman are in this Aquaman movie. Just let us know.
Gotta know.
I mean,
we gotta know.
Look, it's not my call, but if I'm Warner Brothers, I move Blue Beetle to next year.
Oh my God!
Give that time to breathe. Let the star do publicity, and you have Aquaman as the finale of the old DC, and then you have sort of Blue Beetle as the curtain raiser of the new DC, and then Superman Legacy opens and kicks everything off.
Yeah,
I mean,
where are you right now on just superhero movies as a? I mean, to me, they feel like obviously
they need to be special in a way that they didn't 5 years ago.
Right. They need to be special, or they need. It's almost like think back to the 90s. They need to be special. Where you have your Batman movies, or then the X-Men movies, which I guess maybe that was 2000s, or they need to be really small. Like Blue Beetle should be Spawn. or
Yep.
that, like, I think that is a thing we've lost now, is not all these movies are going to make enough to justify $150 million budgets. Blue Beetle, and again, like you say, not to go to this now that you're finally having more diverse leads for these movies, not that those should be the cases where it's low budget, but a property like Blue Beetle honestly should just be something that is a Spawn 1990s level movie where you could make
Which
$90
was
million
also that film
domestic and it's
starred
a hit.
Michael Jai White.
Right.
And I talk about this a lot because it pisses me off, but in the mid 90s, the comic book superhero movie, or even the superhero movie in general, was basically held up by non-white leads. Films like The Mask of Zorro, Men in Black, Black Mask, Spawn, Blade, obviously.
Right.
And then
Blade.
when X-Men and Spider-Man said, oh, these can be A-level Deadpools. Fuck this. We're taking them away and giving them back to white people.
Right.
And
then
then
it's
they
James
hoarded
Marsden
them for
time.
20 years.
Right.
And only now that the comic book superhero movie is no longer an automatic event are we seeing a real effort at diversification.
Right. Do you think it's not, to me, it's, and I think Clayton would back this up, but right in this moment, it doesn't even feel like they're not an event. It does feel like the public, other than movies like Guardians or Batman, where they already love the property, have turned on superhero movies where they don't just feel not special, they feel deeply uncool. I mean, to me, Blue Beetle is opening up in a storm of, we actively dislike this stuff now.
I think you are right. That's what we have seen, is that the comic book superhero movie is now operating in a place where at best it's trust but verify. And at worst it's prove it.
Yeah.
And
well, there's two big things that are really signaling the downfall of superhero movies and superhero media in general. We're not the Streamo boys, but those Secret Invasion ratings on Disney Plus are terrible. It's the second worst. Yeah, second worst next to Miss Marvel. And they're going so far as to put the first 3 episodes on Hulu because this show is supposed to set up the Marvels. And so if people are not watching this show, only the hardcores are going to understand Marvels. And they need that movie to be a hit. Well,
I'm pretty sure 90% of the Marvels will be, they're not, I'm guessing you're not going to have to watch Miss Marvel. You're not really going to have to watch Secret Invasion to understand and enjoy the Marvels.
Well, but the other thing that is huge is the man who started this whole renaissance you can point to, Iron Man himself, Robert Downey Jr., is going around talking about Oppenheimer and saying he's happy to be back in real movies. He's happy to be doing actual acting. He is making these movies that he did for 15 years seem uncool. He's saying Oppenheimer is cool and that stuff was lame and I got my paycheck, but look at me now. I'm doing what I actually want to be doing. And
like Doolittle.
He's the biggest. He's the one guy that you cannot replace when it comes to, you can replace who is Batman. You can replace who is Spider-Man. We've seen that. They will not be able to replace Iron Man. There's not going to be another Iron Man. Maybe, 20, 35 years from now, of course, there'll be another Iron Man. But for this cycle of superhero movies, he is the only guy that is not able to be replaced. Maybe Ryan Reynolds is Deadpool and, and he's saying that these are lame and people are going to believe him.
Yeah.
Do you disagree?
I think that was, I do not disagree. I think part of the issue is that the Marvel Cinematic Universe became so mainstream that it kind of became like stuff that's like wholesome and safe. Like the stuff
American
that
Idol.
Mom and Dad say is okay for you to watch.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
The real cool people go to John Wick. And the real cool people go to, and I know this is a Marvel movie, so forgive me, Across the Spider-Verse or Oppenheimer.
Right.
And again, we should remember the biggest movie of the summer right now is still Guardians of the Galaxy Part 3. And the
Yes.
biggest domestic earner right now is still Across the Spider-Verse.
Right.
But I think we're in a situation where comic book, even Marvel movies, are going to be more execution dependent than they've been in a very long time.
Yes. Yes. So just want to go back to Barbie, maybe to bring this home and look at some of the people coming out of it and what this could do for them. So the two big stars of this movie, Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling, were stars in that position, I think, going into this, where they were very well liked. They were in hits. You know, Margot Robbie was in the $1 billion Suicide Squad movie and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and movies like that. And Ryan Gosling was a headliner of La La Land, you know, him and Emma Stone. And he had Blade Runner, which was not quite a hit.
Yeah.
But how much do you think this raises their profile? You know, modern movie stardom is not what it was in the 80s or 90s, but can this level them up where you do get Ryan Gosling dramas or Margot Robbie romantic comedies or vice versa that could do business because they are the stars of them and they're more popular now coming off of Barbie? Or is it basically find them another IP and hope that it clicks again?
I would lean more toward find another IP, which I think they're already doing. Because I think one of the first DeLuca movies at Warner Brothers is going to be an Ocean's something with the two of them.
Oh, okay.
That being said, I mean, if someone had the no shit Sherlock to make a $35 million romantic comedy starring Robbie and Gosling, I think that would make money.
Yes,
but
yes.
Unfortunately. And this goes back to the old what happened to the movie star, which is that one big problem is that they stopped making the kind of movies that made movie stars. They spent 20 years trying to turn every vaguely handsome white guy into the next Tom Cruise, and they kept casting those white guys in Legend over and over and over again.
Right.
If you don't have Risky Business or or Cocktail or A Few Good Men, you're not going to get your next Tom Cruise.
Right. So Gosling and Robbie are both in that spot where there's not a lot of the firms that they could star in and make 120 million and, be the draw for the movie. I'm going to throw someone out there, Will Ferrell. Now, Will Ferrell, I think, is a star that had been lost at sea for several years now, going back to The House, whenever that opened, or even a little before that. And big studio comedies where the comedy actor is the draw, those seem to have really been bottomed out for a while now. But does being in the Barbie movie do anything for Will Ferrell, do you think? Is this
no.
We're glad to see he's alive? Okay, talk about that.
Just because he's barely in it. B, he's basically playing a variation on the character he played in the Lego movie and the character he played in Bewitched. Which was a film that nobody remembers because it wasn't very good. His presence is not necessary for the film's success. In fact, that whole subplot, you could have cut most of that out and been fine.
Yes, we both
whatever,
agree.
Who cares?
Yeah.
There's a couple good jokes from it, so whatever, no harm. But again, I think the problem with the live action comedy, and studios are certainly trying this year, bless their hearts, is that over the last several years, not just Marvel, but Marvel was a big part of this, every big franchise IP started offering comedy as an added value element, as a way to make it palpable to the masses. So if you wanted something funny, even just this spring, you could go to Shazam 2, you could go to Super Mario Brothers, you could go to Scream 6, you could go to Ant-Man the Wasp: Quantumania. So you didn't need to see Mafia Mama or Renfeld. So you didn't need to see Mafia Mama to get your big screen chuckles.
Right.
And that's been a problem for a while.
Right. No Hard Feelings. I think when you were last on, that was still a few weeks from coming out. Now that movie has did okay. Do you think it helps the future of that type of movie, or it's more of a sign of, you know what, even with Jennifer Lawrence, this was the ceiling? And I mean, I think it maybe in a way hurts the ability for that type of movie to get made because it didn't break out. It did fine, but it didn't break out.
I'm leaning toward your point of view
Mm-hmm.
with the caveat that it might do spectacular on PVOD.
Mm-hmm.
And the more money, the more money it makes in theaters and on PVOD, the more money it makes down the line. So there's still long-term value in putting that kind of film like that in theaters. And I'm sure it'll do huge on Netflix for 10 days.
Yeah.
Right. Where
I also
people
think that was a film that was hurt by the writer's strike because Jenna Lawrence couldn't go on talk shows and plug it.
Yes. Yeah, she got a Hot Ones in, but she probably would have done a couple of weeks even after the opening of going on the chat shows. Yeah. She would have done a spot on Johnny.
You're saying the episode of The Rewatchables where Bill Simmons forgot to press record did not add any sort of money to the coffers of No Hard Feelings. Yeah.
And I don't know to what extent it ever does. And that's always been one of my ongoing existential questions. We see so little cross-media crossover. I mean, for example, the example I always give is that in October of 2016, David S. Pumpkin basically takes over the internet for a week. Inferno is still a flop.
Right. Right.
In 2021, Olivia Rodrigo becomes the biggest pop star since Taylor Swift. The ratings for High School Musical, the series, don't really move much.
Right.
Yeah.
So, having huge success over here doesn't necessarily translate to huge success over here. And viral promotion doesn't necessarily help the thing that you are promoting.
Right.
Well, I mean, and not to harp on this, but look at Bert Kreischer's The Machine. That Bert Kreischer, he's on podcasts that millions and millions of people listen to. I mean, more people probably listened to the episode of the Joe Rogan show he was interviewed on than saw his movie by multiples. And there just was no crossover from that podcast listening audience to the film going audience.
Yeah.
So, Scott, looking ahead to, let's say, August, you've talked about the Meg. You think Mutant Mania has a chance? I mean, do you think Mutant Mania, the Ninja Turtles movie, maybe is going to have a better chance because of how well Barbie did, and it could kind of ride that, toy nostalgia? Okay.
Yeah.
But also Spidey cartoon.
It's also, almost every single theatrical screening of Across the Spider-Verse had the TMNT preview on it. And it's everyone. I have not seen it yet. I'm not going to till it opens because I'm out of town. And I think the review embargo is yet to drop. But everybody I've talked to has said it's very good. And the best compliment I can give it is they had clips in CinemaCon, and I laughed out loud sitting in the CinemaCon theater on my laptop. Now,
I will say this. We had a friend and guest on this show, Jeff Bach, Exhibitor Relations Co. He went to CinemaCon, and he came out of that saying that The Flash was going to be one of the biggest movies ever, was going to make $1 billion. And obviously The Flash came out to be what The Flash was. And our theory is they were just pumping. Otherwise? And well, you were saying, Scott Mendelson raised his hand. He was saying otherwise. So our thought was they were pumping some kind of noxious gas, maybe pumping pure hype into the vents at CinemaCon. So I just hope that your TMNT laughter was not also caused by the, the gas that they were pumping in the vents at CinemaCon. You may be impervious to it.
General area, and it didn't work on the Flash. So
okay, right.
Yeah, it's an $80 million picture. If it opens at 25 and legs out to 70, they're fine. But it could do a lot better than that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to stay on here, and I was high on this at the beginning of the summer. And Clayton, you were not on board with me there. I think this is going to overperform. I could see this Turtles movie opening at like 40. I think it's going to be big.
Good, and it's so much more helpful when you're marketing an IP film where part of your pitch is this is going to be a good movie.
Right.
It's not just going to be, it's another Fast film. It's another
indie movie, Indiana
Indie
Jones,
movie,
another
thank you.
Transformers.
And
Yeah,
another Transformers, or even to a certain extent, another Mission Impossible. I love
Right.
the first
Yeah.
trailer to MI7. I started to worry after the second trailer, and I was right.
yeah. I mean,
Um,
listen, we could say it now. The last time you were on, once we stopped recording, we were off air, and it's just three guys shooting the shit. The first thing you said to us, Scott, was, "Listen, I got to tell you something. I saw Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning, and it's not good." And you told us this when you were last on in June, and our faces went white because at that point, Dead Reckoning was supposed to be the savior of the box office. We didn't know Barbie would be Barbie, and when you dropped that news on us, we were scared. But thank God for Barbie. So
And Oppenheimer, Barbenheimer.
and
They go
Oppenheimer,
in
Barbenheimer did
tandem.
it.
what you guys think of Dead Reckoning? And you're allowed to like it. Most people did.
I did like it. I saw it in France on a vacation and saw it dubbed in French without any subtitles. And I really enjoyed it. It played, maybe that was the way to see it. Maybe at CinemaCon, if you had
There's a
seen
lot
it.
of exposition for that movie.
There is, but at that point, you just looking at the faces, and I'm like, oh, Tom Cruise looks mad here, but Vanessa Kirby looks intrigued. And, then you just zone out also.
It's funny because I
And
thought a lot of the dialogue was terrible, so maybe that helped.
I think it did. I didn't hear anything, and the sort of French accents was very soothing.
Je suis l'entity.
Yeah, it was beautiful. And then you get the train sequence, and you get all that, and that plays no matter what language. So I liked it.
Well, I'll tell you something, Scott, that's damning. I didn't even see it.
Yeah, that's
Holy
damning.
shit.
Because it wasn't even in, I did not get around to seeing it in a PLF. And I thought to myself, if I'm not seeing it in a PLF, then I'll just wait till it goes on Max.
Oh no! Well, on Paramount Plus.
Paramount Plus.
Yeah.
Sorry, right?
Yeah.
That's right.
So Scott, I know we've been on here for a while, but we gotta just quickly touch on, because this is our weekend preview episode. Haunted Mansion is coming out this weekend. So this is Disney making another version of a movie based on their amusement park property. Of course, they made one in the 90s with Eddie Murphy.
2000s.
Wow, that far in. I guess, yeah, if his Nutty Professor was mid-90s, yeah, so it's still in that family daddy daycare run. And that movie did fine, right? The Eddie Murphy Haunted Mansion.
Yeah,
I don't think it was
185 worldwide on a.
Okay.
I don't know what the budget was. Give me a minute. I'll look it up. Sorry.
So this one feels like just the turd of all turds this weekend. I don't even know if it's good or not, but it seems like it wouldn't matter because it has no buzz. Barbie is going to take all the buzz.
The reviews are mixed negative, basically 50-50 right now.
Yeah.
It apparently cost like $150 million, which,
oh my God.
To be fair, the money's allegedly on the screen, so
okay.
At least I can say that. But no, it has no buzz. It has no. This is Iger's legacy, which is that he was wonderful at acquisition, but he was not successful at making new, theatrically specific, new to cinema franchises. And now that he's run out in terms of the big remakes, the Marvel movies, the Star Wars stuff, what do you got left? Now the fact that they have utterly failed to make new stuff after National Treasure and Pirates of the Caribbean 20 years ago, they're in trouble.
Right. So how low do you think this goes? What are you seeing as the opening number for this?
I still think, I want to be optimistic and say 25.
Oh, you do think it could go that high? Interesting.
So, the original opened 2003. It had a $90 million production budget. It opened at $24.2 million on its way to 75 domestic. So you're saying that the new one with a budget that's just a little bit bigger. It's a lot bigger, but like
a little bit bigger.
A little bit bigger. But that was 20 years ago. That movie was made for 90. That seems ridiculous at the time. It's going to make what, $1 million more than the original did? That's pretty bad.
And that's being, hopeful. 30, I
Yeah.
think, is a cap, but hope brings eternal.
Mm-hmm.
Now the thought with
To be
this,
fair, for what this is worth anymore, and who's to say it means a damn thing, and but it'll be on 90 days. It'll be on Disney Plus just in time for Halloween. So
yeah,
Yeah, I wonder. I definitely could see this falling into the teens. Honestly, maybe even like
me
12 or
too.
13, because there's no star. There's names, but Tiffany Haddish really never got to that next level as a bona fide movie star. Unfortunately, she just came along at the wrong time. Lakeith Stanfield, great actor, but not a star, so on and so forth. So I don't know. I feel like Barbie, especially in that same space, is so all encompassing that I'm going to go as low as like maybe 14 this opens
That's
Well,
to
fair.
before.
if we're talking about demo wise, Barbie, one of the demos that Barbie didn't do as well in was with the Black community. And that's why people are thinking Haunted Mansion might be a family choice
Hmm.
for Black, Hispanic families and things like that. But my
True.
thought with that is that Barbie is such a monolith and such a big movie that
Hmm.
those families are going to think, I got to see this Barbie movie because everybody's talking about this Barbie movie. I have to see what's going on with it. And I think that is going to kill Haunted Mansion. I do think
Hmm.
that there's going to be less people going to see Haunted Mansion than people think. And it does look tired. I mean, it looks beat and tired and the same kind of slop that Disney's been trying to feed us for years now. And that's why
Yeah.
I just think people are going to reject it. So I'm not going to go 14, but I think this thing probably makes 19. So
Okay. And
just under 20.
here's an interesting thing about this matchup is that we know Barbie features Rhea Perlman is in the Barbie movie in a bit in a featured role, and Haunted Mansion, one of its stars is Danny DeVito.
Mhm.
So I don't know
One of
what the
them might get a
status.
surprise Oscar nomination. One of them won't.
Wow, wow, interesting. I mean, that is going to be. I know they are sort of divorced, but also sleep in the same bed. I know they have some kind of situation like that where
They will never divorce. They are
they'll never
separated, but
divorce.
they will never divorce.
I mean, this weekend could be the thing that causes that divorce. They finally may have to change their tune
Her
after
success
Rhea
is just
Perlman.
too big.
Right. After Rhea Perlman's movie makes 10 times what Danny DeVito's does at the weekend box office.
Mhm.
I don't know how you stay in the same room after that.
But he
So
had his run. To be honest, he had his run.
he
I
had
think
his
he's
run,
open
and
to
it's
the
time for
idea
her
That's,
run.
that yeah.
well, I mean, if you're talking about DeVito, I mean, that's part of the problem is with the whole we have no new movie stars is that the industry is counting on people that were in their prime 30, 20, 30, 40 years ago to still pretend like it's the 80s, 90s, and 2000s.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
Owen
I
Wilson,
mean,
Haunted Mansion. I mean, Owen
yeah,
Wilson is
the
he's a
Haunting
guy.
was 1999.
Right.
Yes, it's
Will this
crazy.
follow suit with him getting decapitated at the end of the third act? Probably not, but we can hope.
We can
When
hope.
when we were in the 90s, you'd have a movie like A Grumpy Old Men where the novelty was, look, we've got stars from a long time ago who were the stars of this movie. Now that's sort of the idea of every movie. Every movie
Mhm.
is
Yeah.
a version of our Walter Matthau and Jack Lemmon teaming up because it's just here's stars from 30 years ago on top, but it's not a novelty anymore. So
But they're
we'll
still
see. Not
pretending to be in their quote unquote prime.
right, right.
Yeah.
So
I'm,
I think
A View to a Kill is now the standard operating formula.
right. So I think we all agree that it's going to be, the order is pretty much going to be Barbie, Oppenheimer. I get well. Here's where all right. If we're predicting our top five for this weekend, we all agree it's going to be Barbie 1, Oppenheimer 2. I think Barbie could still make 90 plus million, maybe make 100 million this weekend. I think the hold
Mhm.
could be that
Yep.
strong. But number 3 is where things can get interesting because does anyone here think Sound of Freedom could actually outgross Haunted Mansion in the 3-day this weekend?
Sure. I mean, if it does
It's
another $15 million and Haunted Mansion just plays worst case scenario, absolutely.
Yeah. I think
I
that's
mean,
where I'm going.
and we know for sure that it's going to beat Mission Impossible. Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, I think Mission Impossible gets beat by Sound of Freedom, definitely. So it's whether or not Haunted Mansion can do anything.
Yeah.
And that's the
Yeah.
only thing that'll keep Sound of Freedom out of number 3.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's pretty clear Mission Impossible is going to fall to number 5 this weekend. And then the huge descent begins. Yeah, it's last thing, Scott, that I'll throw out there as I'm looking at the current movies out there. Give us your take on Pixar's Elemental and The Run. Did it, Clayton disagrees when I say this movie in some ways redeemed itself. But where are you at with this run and what Elemental could mean for the future of Pixar? Is it not as bleak as we would have thought after that first weekend?
You're right. It is not as bleak as we thought. I mean, when a film does, it looks like it's going to top 150 by the end from a $29 million opening. That's spectacular. Now, does that mean it's actually a hit in the sense that it will make money in theatrical alone? No, probably not. It's going to squeak to 400 on a 200 budget. But this could be a situation where it takes one for the team in terms of reacclimating viewers to seeing Pixar films in theaters. Thank you very much. After 3 years of otherwise.
Right.
It is good. The word of mouth was exceptional. That was one reason why it's leggy. So even if Elemental by itself is not a hit, I'm a lot more optimistic for Elio than I was a month ago.
Yes.
Which is the next Pixar movie, comes out in March, has a very specific and simple premise too. It's about a boy that gets abducted by aliens who accidentally think he's the leader of the human race, and he has to pull an encounter at Farpoint type trial for humanity or something.
Oh, love it. I love it. Nice and simple.
No, you don't love it. Stop. Don't say you love it.
I love it.
Pat, you don't love it. Pat doesn't love it. He's kissing up to you, Scott. You can tell.
I love it.
You can see right through it.
I love it.
Do that to you.
Anyway,
I love it.
So is it actually a hit? No. It's still what we used to call in the 90s, if you read Entertainment Weekly, a disappointment in relation to cost, which is also the case for something like Fast X, Indiana Jones 5, The Flash, Mission Impossible 7, Transformers 7, films that are making decent amount, A Little Mermaid, films that are making decent amounts of money for theaters, but are still not earning enough to justify their exorbitant budgets.
Right.
Yes. Pixar needs to do something about their budgets, and if they cannot do what they do within the structure of a decent budget, then they will not be able to continue to exist.
Yeah.
So Scott, thank you so much for being on. Before we go, where can our listeners find you? Of course, the show is bigger than ever. We've gotten an influx of new listeners the last few months, so we're excited to now transfer our new listeners over to the work of the great Scott Mendelson. Where could they find you?
I'm still at thewrap.com. I'm at Scott Mendelson on Twitter, and technically I'm on Blue Sky, because is anyone on Blue Sky? It's so lonely over there.
Well, they will be now after this.
Yeah.
So follow, and of course, follow Scott Mendelson on Twitter. Just a essential read every single tweet. So of course, the BO Boys, give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. That has been huge. These 5-star reviews really help new listeners find us. Email us at theboboyspodcast@gmail.com. Love getting your emails. We cannot get through any on this episode because it's just been too jam-packed, but we will get you emails very soon.
I just have one.
Well, and also, Clayton, your microphone has gone out of control, so we've got to stick away from you right now. So email us at theboboyspodcast@gmail.com. Follow us on social media at theboboyspod. And we are YouTubers. Scott, you are going to be on YouTube, so get excited about that. All the YouTube comments coming in, and follow us, subscribe, ring that bell on YouTube. And Clayton, I don't think there's anything left to say, and we're going to see if Clayton could even say anything else right now, because Clayton, there's nothing left to say, right?
Except for I
Except-
sound like a robot.
You sound like a robot, and like a robot, it's time to say, until next time, we'll smell you at the box office. Nailed it.